We now take you to the broadcast of It's Time with Reverend Nathaniel W. Martin. Here's Reverend Martin.
I am the proud pastor of the New Life Institutional Baptist Church here in the city of Los Angeles, and we are worshiping with our sister church. We're being hosted by our sister church, Shiloh Missionary Christian Church, and we're located at 8916 South Main Street. That's 8916 South Main. New Life Institutional Baptist Church. We're still going on. We're still going strong. And we're still glorifying and worshiping and praising the God and reaching out to our brothers and our sisters in the midst as God shall grants us to be able to reach out our hand to help our brothers and our sisters from the homeless on up, because we're all God's children. And Shiloh Missionary Christian Church is pastored by my good friend, the Reverend Dr. Della F. Hollins. I was off last week, and you can see I'm rusty. I can't get into my flow, but thank God that we're back. And we had a funeral last week, and I couldn't get out of the cemetery in time to get over here, and got a funeral tomorrow. And it's just that time where you got to keep your black suit clean, because there's always a notification coming either by email or Facebook or text message or telephonically. And the older you get, the more funerals you're going to have to go to, because the more friends, relatives, and loved ones you will have lost. I want to give a shout out to Miss Roxy Griffith, who is out here right now, and she's worshiping with us. She's out here from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and she gave us a great solo on last Sunday, and it really set the house on fire, it set the mood, and we just thank God for her being out here with us. Also, I would like to lift up a good classmate, playmate that we came up there in Houston together. And his name is Glenn Cheeks, and he has stage 4 cancer. We ask him prayer for him, that God may intervene and intercede and lift him up. Okay? You never know what's going to happen in the world, but you just continue to give God the glory and tell God thank you. You can't tell God what to do or how to do it. You just got to say thank you, Jesus, for what you do, and thank you that you love us as you do. And I hope that He'll throw His arms around you and our loved one, and His will be done in our lives. All right? All right. Now, this offering that you are viewing this presentation is entitled It's Time, and it's time for social justice, social activism. And because you can't live Christianity in a bubble, and you cannot practice Christianity in a vacuum. You're going to have to be out here with us, saints and sinners. And so that's why we have this particular broadcast, because we have to address the issues and the things that confront us, even though we can't address them all in a little 30-minute segue or presentation, but we surely can hit on it. Now, we always talk about the environment, and if you saw that train derailment down there in Palestine, Ohio, that's the very reason why we have to be so watchful, because they put these railroad tracks through our areas, through our neighborhoods, through our communities. And when they have a derailment and they're carrying toxic chemicals that we don't even know that's on that train, and look at how it has devastated that community. And you can hear how hollow the declarations are coming from the politicians, saying that your water is safe to drink. People know that water is not safe to drink because the politicians don't drink it. And so that is why we have to be watchful about our environment. Now, the people that lived in those areas, they didn't know that train was carrying that type of chemicals, transporting that type of fuel and stuff like that. You just don't know what these people are doing that run these railroads. Railroad has always been a dirty, crooked business. They always stole people's land and murdered folks so they could take their land and make a railroad throughway and the like. And so it's no wonder that even Buttigieg says, well, we need the railroad. We don't need the railroads killing us, you know. And so these type of things are why we have this type of program, so we can talk about the social justice issue, because your environment affects you. And you don't have to get all classy and talk about the proximate and the distal and all of that. Your environment affects you, because it could be miles away and yet get in your drinking water, or contaminate your fields, or fix it so your air is polluted. You have to be up on these type of issues, and you cannot sleep on it. When they talk about fracking, to get at the oil reserves over there in Inglewood, where I live, they're always talking about how safe it is. Well, if it's that safe, why are we talking about it? Because of the fact that it's not safe. You're putting all of that type of chemicals down in the earth, and you don't take no responsibility for the consequences, the result. You just want to get the oil out the ground. You're going to get the oil out the ground. If you contaminate the water table, you're not going to do nothing about it to help the poor people, except say you're in our thoughts and our prayers. And believe me, thoughts and prayers at that point ain't going to cut it. And just like I'm saying I'm sorry after you have done some injury to a person, you got to make that person whole. Which brings me to our scripture for our reparations, which says in Deuteronomy chapter 15, picking up the reading at verse 12, and if thy brother, an Hebrew man or an Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee and serve thee 6 years, then in the 7th year thou shalt let him or her go out free from thee. And when thou sendest them out free from thee, thou shalt not let them go away empty. Thou shalt furnish him or her liberally out of thy flock, and out of thy floor, and out of thy winepress. Of that wherewith the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, thou shalt give, not loan, not let them borrow, but give unto them. The word of God for the people of God. And so, you see, my friends, God looks out for those who are less fortunate. And who does he work through? Why, he works through people like you and me, who have maybe more of God's blessings and resources than the other person may have at that time. And so you have to be generous, you have to be liberal, you have to be a blessing, taking seriously what Jesus said, it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. And where Jesus also said, do unto others as you would have them to do unto you. Would that we would follow that more closely in our interactions with one another. All right. Yes, we believe in reparations. Here in the state of California, they have a reparations commission, and I had a chance to sit in on one of their sessions, which was conducted down here on 104th and San Pedro in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago. And I got some valuable information, and I still think they should have dealt with the ideology that undergirded slavery and that undergirded Jim Crow and segregation, because they're all part of one piece, slavery and segregation. based upon white supremacy. Which brings me to a novel theory that is in the world, and it has been spread all over the world. Remember, one time the sun never set on the British Empire. That was a boast that the British Empire made. And the British Empire had its foot on the neck of all of the darker races all over the world. They had even invaded China to start selling opium to those that civilization over there. And white supremacy has never, a European period, has been nothing but a cancer on the face of the earth. Yes, a cancer. They didn't bring nothing. They didn't give us nothing. They said they brought civilization, but what civilization was it that they brought at the point of a gun? Remember, fascism and Nazism and racism all started in Europe and was brought over here to the 13 colonies at that time. And the United States has sought to emulate and imitate its British cousin in its imperialism thrust. And so you have to be careful who you are listening to and who are you allowing to get in your head telling you that slavery was a divine plan of God. Slavery was not a divine plan of God. Slavery was a man-made catastrophe, a man-made imposition upon the face of the earth. And a black man named Kelvin J. Cochran, an educated man who was a former Atlanta fire chief, said recently that slavery was God's divine plan, and he calls it patriotic. Now, it's a falsehood that Africa was poor and on the verge of social, spiritual, and economic catastrophe. Remember, the world descended upon the continent of Africa with the Portuguese, who didn't have nothing to trade. They had nothing in the island that people wanted. Even the Africans told them, say, well, yeah, we'll trade with you, but you ain't got nothing to trade. And so consequently, these Portuguese had to go and to other countries, other nations, and get them to trade with them so that they would have something to come back to the people on the continent of Africa and in order to trade with them. Remember, salt, sugar, chocolate, mint, diamonds, lithium, gold, coltan, platinum, ivory, all of these things were in plenty of supply on the continent of Africa. On the continent of Africa, there was no lack. What it was a group of civilizations of people getting along with each other. And then here come these European ships in the distance, coming straight to the continent of Africa. Africa ain't bothering them. Africa wasn't trying to go to Europe and all of that type of thing, because they didn't have nothing in Europe that Africans wanted. But yet these Europeans invaded, first as friendly merchants in seeking and trade, but the more they found how rich Africa was in gold, and at that time, which was a highly treasured item, very valuable, when they found that the certain countries had diamonds just literally laying down on the ground and all that type of thing. Then it wasn't long before they being the Portuguese, the Spanish, and later the British, and after them, of course, the Americans and the French, don't leave the French out, and the Germans, and the Dutch, and all of that litany of European nations descended upon the continent of Africa. Now, they didn't come to Africa for goodwill. They came to get everything they could exploit from Africa, from the continent of Africa. And remember, Africa is a continent, not just a country. And we got to talk about Benin, Ethiopia, which was a great nation at that time, a very powerful nation, Angola, and those nations that constitute the West African coast, or the Gold Coast, as the Europeans termed it. So Africa was not poor. Africa was rich. It was the European that was poor. You got to get that right. When you go to England or British Museum, why, everything in there that's worthwhile is from Africa. They stole all of the Benin bronzes and just literally ravaged that nation and took their valuable artifacts and artistic items and put them in the British Museum, built the museum, and filled it up with all African artifacts. Now, if you want to said, in other words, someone said that the average person, citizen of Benin, doesn't have the money to travel to a British museum to see his own people's handiwork, you know. And now the British have the gall, the nerve to say, well, we're not going to give it back to you, but we will lend to you if you will build a museum, and we will lend you on a rotating basis your merchandise that we stole from you in the first place. Now, how arrogant and what hubris is that? Thus, the lie is still continuing to be spread that Africa was poor. Africa ain't poor right now. But Africa is still resource rich. The coltan that goes in our cell phones is most plentiful on the continent of Africa. The lithium, thank God the Nigerians have finally woke up and said, well, now look, we're going to start mining our own lithium and not let the other nations, the Americans and the Europeans and the Chinese, just come in here and take our lithium and give us nothing almost for it. No, we're going to mine it, we're going to refine it, and we're going to market it ourselves. Wow, that is a very great statement, and I hope they are successful in stopping the rape of Nigeria for their natural resources. Remember, the great oil companies just went into Nigeria and literally made side deals with the so-called chiefs, as the Europeans term them, rather than call them kings, because actually that's what a chief is. He's the king. And side deals with those chiefs and just took that oil. And once that European comes, he's like a cancer and a parasite, a leech. And he takes everything out of that country that is valuable, even the people. And actually the people were the most valuable. So we got the slave trade going. And I haven't gone to see this latest Black Panther picture where they got the warrior queens and the warrior kings and all of that. But notice when you look at those pictures that there was a great trade, a great commerce in human people, human trafficking. So the European promoted the slave trade, and remember, the slave trade in America was sinfully sadistic, where a person was reduced to a handkerchief or shadow, something, a portable something I just do what I want with, And you can't do that. You can't stop me because I got the law. I got the Constitution on my side. So I don't believe that even the bondage of the Israelites in Egypt was as cruel as slavery in the United States of America. Remember, Joseph was a slave. He was sold into Egypt as a slave, for all you Bible scholars. But as a slave, he was still able to keep his own identity, keep his own language, to keep his own religion, keep his own culture, and he was able to ascend and be promoted to being the second person behind only the Pharaoh on the throne. So obviously slavery in Egypt was not as rigorous as slavery on the plantations here in the United States of America. Remember, all 13 colonies were slave-owning colonies from 1619 onward. Those of you that know anything about the 1619 Project, you know that that is a counter date for when the United States was founded. It's not 1776, but actually 1619. And of course, the apologists and the historians all push back against that because it's a counter theory to 1776. But it is more realistic to say that the United States started with those slave ships in 1619 than to say that the United States started with the defeat of the British in 1776. Remember, we got what, July 4th, 1776, but you got another date, a month in 1619. But that's when the first 20 slaves were offloaded onto the plantation. And that was really the start of the American slave trade. Because remember, the next year, 1620, was when the Pilgrims landed, so-called Pilgrims, landed at Plymouth Rock with their so-called virtue and that piety, false piety, if you ask me, and with their religious piety, but yet they held God's people in slavery so they could sit on their lees and have freedom. It was freedom for the white folks, for slavery for the black folk. All right, I began to digress. I also wanted to hit on the fact that there was a press conference held this week. Some of you remember that was Breonna Taylor was killed in Louisville, Kentucky, based upon a false no-knock warrant. It was false on his face, and it was false on his pretenses. And as a result, Breonna Taylor was killed in her home because they didn't have to knock. They just came on in there, bust the door down. They claimed they announced themselves, but her boyfriend was there, and he didn't hear no announcement. And so he started shooting because he thought somebody would break it in. And in the ensuing gunfire, Miss Breonna Taylor was killed. And she had done nothing wrong, and her boyfriend had done nothing wrong. There were no drugs in the house, but yet the police informant had told the police that Breonna Taylor's house was a drug house, and so and she was a emergency room technician trying to do right, and but she was killed. And as a result, the Louisville Police Department had to be investigated by the Department of Justice, U.S. Department of Justice, under Attorney General Merrick Garland. And here were some of the findings: shocking misconduct, excessive force, searches based on invalid and no-knock warrants, unlawful car stops, detention and harassment of people during sweeps, broad patterns of discrimination against black people and those with behavioral health problems. Talking about the disabled. Let's see. The findings were the dysfunction that still afflicts law enforcement agencies. Now, the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division, her name was Kristen Clark, this was her statement. She said the targeting of black people for traffic stops and searches turned conventional law enforcement practices into weapons of oppression, submission, and fear. And those were some of the basic findings that came out of the 90-page report that resulted in the investigation, 5 minutes, of the shooting death, murder of Miss Breonna Taylor, who was, like I said, an innocent victim sleeping in her home, in her bed, when they kicked the door down with no knock warrants. They seemed to have carte blanche. They thought they had carte blanche, but this time they had to answer for it. And I think the detective that went to the judge and falsely swore that warrant has had to resign, and I hope she's going to go to jail, serve some jail time. That's what I don't like about Merrick Garland. He never follows through with any criminal charges. No teeth in his announcement. He tell you what's going on, but hey, just like we knew that already. Well, what are you going to do about it? Who are you going to charge or bring to justice so the police can be put on notice? But we still have the same patterns and practices that they identified in Louisville in most of the police departments across this country. And you don't have to go far. You can go right here in Los Angeles. And I still keep seeing that truck blowing up. The man had the fireworks in his house. His house didn't blow up. But when the LAPD came out there and put all that stuff in their truck, it blew up immediately. Great big old truck, shining, just blowing up in the neighborhood. The door was 500 feet away in somebody's backyard. All of that type of thing. All because of their mistakes and errors. Also, on March 9th, 1892, 3 men were lynched, 3 black men who had opened up what we call the People's Grocery Company, opened up across the street from the white grocery store, and was cutting into the white man's business, because before then, all the black people had to go to the white man's store. You know how bad they treat you in their store. Even now, they just settled a case here in up north there, where a family was going to. A black family from out of state, stopped at Starbucks because their daughter was going to take a statistical test at some college or university up there, and they stopped at Starbucks. And it wasn't long before the police come up and roughed them up and made them show identification. And when they didn't show identification because they didn't understand what they were being arrested for, then of course the police handcuffed them and roughed them up, put them in the back of the car, and then later released them. But these people said, no, you ain't gonna treat us like that, and they sued. And so the municipality has to pay out, I think, $8.25 million. And so that's what's still happening. So things still going on, and we must be alert, and we must not sleep. R.D.B. Wells said, go west, leave Memphis because of those things back in the day. She had wound up having to leave Memphis to save her life. Well, it is not that different today. And as I take my leave of you, I pleasantly thank God to be back, and I pray that God will continue to bless you and yours until we meet again. And remember, if you're working on a job and they don't want to pay you, take a page from the slave and don't work for them. Thank you, Doc. We out of here.